Hey guys, I just wanted to do this quick video on the stencil material that I'm selling so that there's no confusion as to what you're purchasing and how to use it. So this is a one-time use stencil, and as you can see here, it's already been cut out, and the size that I make it is the size that you tell me to make it. And the reason that I ask you for the size is because, as you'll see later, it will exactly fit on the board that I'm trying to make here. So this blue part is the stencil, and it is Aura Mask masking film. It's also referred to as 813. So I've already cut this, and what I'm gonna do is put my transfer paper on top of it. And when you buy this from me, the transfer paper will already be attached, so you don't have to worry about this part. So I just carefully lay it over the stencil. And stretch it out and attach it. And the reason that there's transfer paper is because this is a one-time use stencil, and there's no bridges like there would be on a Mylar reusable stencil. So I don't need to keep any of the letters in place. So any of the openings in the O's or the D's in this, it's fine because you're going to attach it to the transfer paper and then you're going to put it on the board that you're working with. So it's okay that they're not attached. So I'm going to find my squeegee tool, which I can't find right now. Here it is. Okay. So usually before I send it, I make sure that it's good and attached. But you can take anything like a credit card, anything, a piece of hard plastic to do this with. Just make sure that it's good and attached. And so what you're gonna do is you can flip it over if you want. That's what I prefer to do. And you're gonna peel the stencil away from this backing paper onto the transfer tape. And as you go, just go slowly, just make sure that it's all coming across. But this transfer paper is really good. You shouldn't have a problem at all. And then you can just discard that, that's trash. And take your board that you want to work with. So since I cut it the exact same size as my board, what I like to do is find a corner and line it up. Now you want to be really careful with this step. Sometimes if you're lucky you can reposition it if you have to, but it's sometimes not easy. So just smooth it out with your hand. This is a small stencil, so it's not that big of a deal to do it all at one time. If it was a really big stencil, what you would do is slowly peel it away from the paper, line it up, and then peel the paper as you go down the stencil. So I'm going to take my squeegee tool again, and just make sure that it's good and attached, and you're going to work out any kind of air bubbles. Now sometimes you will get a crinkle or two in the paper, in the transfer paper. That's fine because it usually doesn't affect the stencil at all. And then what you're going to do is just find a corner and just slowly start to peel up this paper here. And this paper is sticky because it's doing its job in keeping your stencil in place. So go nice and slow. What I like to do is keep this paper flat and just slowly peel away. If you have any pieces that aren't, are coming back up onto your transfer paper, just put it back down, re-squeegee it, and try it again. transfer paper is trash. Sometimes what I like to do just to make sure that it's good and adhered is I take the paper backing that I already told you to throw out and just go back over it again. Because sometimes the stencil will lift a little bit when you go to transfer it. It's no big deal. Just get in there and get it nice and down good. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first layer of paint, and I always do my base layer again. So my sign is white, so I put a nice good coating of white paint. And then actually what I prefer to do is do 2 layers of my base coat. I think it really helps with bleeding because I tend to have a very heavy hand with paint. So I find that doing 2 layers of my base coat really does make a big difference. Also, sanding your board very smooth before you start is a good tip too. That helps a lot because sometimes if you have a board with thick paint, you can actually have your stencil bleed into the paint lines on your board. Especially if you use like big paintbrushes, they tend to leave almost like rivets in your board. It's no big deal. I use something like this. I think this is 320 sandpaper. Just after it's all painted, just give it a good couple swipes to really get any kind of excess debris off of it. All right, I'm going to pause the video for right now, and we're gonna come back after this is painted, and we're gonna do our color, and then you're gonna see me remove the stencil. All right. So we're back to do our color layer. So like I said before, I have a very heavy hand with paint. So I feel that doing the 2 layers of the base coat really does help a ton. And I don't really do like a brushing motion. I do kind of this like short dabbing motion. And while I have the time, I just want to reiterate the fact that I'm making this video because those who are used to traditional reusable stencils may not understand how to use 813. So this is a one-time use stencil. So as you're going to see later, when I pull it up, the stencil is no longer able to be used, and you'll see why. And it's because the vinyl does just rip into pieces, and that's how we're going to remove it. So please make sure that you apply it correctly and very carefully the first time around, because you might not get another chance. And I wish I had some reusable stencils to show y'all, but I don't. I saw one in the store, and they have little bridges to connect the inside of the letters, and that's how the whole thing stays together when you're not using it, when it's not attached to something, because it's just one big piece of plastic. And you don't need bridges with this type of stencil because it's one-time use, and you are using the transfer paper that we used before to put it on the board that you're working on. All right, so I'm almost done with this. And going to pause the video, and when I come back, this thing will be magically painted with a couple more coats. All right, and I'm back for the moment of truth. We're going to take the stencil off. So, since this is a one-time use stencil, we're just going to peel it. And I know people have their own techniques for doing this, especially when to peel the stencil. I always peel my stencils dry. I just have really bad luck and tend to touch wet paint into places it doesn't belong. If you saw my shirt right now, you'd know what I meant. So just gently peel. You should not have any problems at all. This 813 is specifically designed to come up just like this. And a little bit of bleeding is going to be inevitable. It's not that big of a deal. You can touch it up later. If you're using a surface that you can't easily touch up, like a board that's stained, some people do use Mod Podge, which is like a craft glue. I don't really care for it. It's sticky, it's glue. Some people will argue that if you use a very, very light hand, you shouldn't have any issues at all. So now I'm using my weeding tool. This one's from Cricut, but you can use any kind of sharp pinpoint object. You can use a toothpick, you can use dental picks, you can use, I don't know, anything else sharp. So in order to get the middles out of the letters, I'm just, oops, there's a nice bleed, no big deal. I'm going to just find the edge of the stencil, just grab a corner of it and lift up, and everything should come up nice and neat. I had a feeling I was going to get a bleed there. When I was painting it, I could tell that there was a little bit of an edge that was sticking up. But that should cover with white paint pretty easily. If it is a really, really big bleed, you can take some sandpaper to it and just get the raised part of the paint off before you try to touch it up. But overall, we're looking mighty fine over here. So I'm almost done, and I think I actually wound up with 3 or 4 coats of this purple paint. This is craft paint, and I normally don't use craft paint. I normally get the sample cans from Lowe's, but I just came across this purple and I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. This sign is for my mom, and she loves pinks and purples, so that's what I went with. But if you want to take a peek here, I normally use these Valspar sample cans because they're $3 or $4 a can, and they have a lot more paint in them. And also the coverage is a lot better too, so I tend to prefer those. The only downside is they do take a lot longer to dry, but the coverage is better, so, you know. Alright, let's see. Looking for the edge on this. There we go. Alright, we are almost done here. So what I'm going to do later is I'm just going to go back around and just lightly make sure that any of the small little marks that come from this weeding tool are covered up with paint. You gotta have a light hand when you do this. This tool tends to leave some scratch marks if you're not careful enough. But alright, looking pretty good. Just got a couple little areas with some small bleeds, no big deal. Oops, I missed a spot. Sometimes if you don't have good lighting, it's actually kind of hard to see the stencil material. Make sure you got it all up. Alright, so I'll fix up that little spot, and there you go. So hopefully this helped you better understand the stencil material that is for sale on this listing. Please reach out to me with any questions. I really do not mind questions. I would rather you ask me how to do every single step before you mess something up, please. And anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this, and let me know if you got any questions. Thank you, guys.